Also, I'm wearing my Santa hat in this video. Even though this is not a Christmas-related video, it is an end-of-the-year-related video, and I felt sort of sad that I wasn't wearing my Santa hat. My Santa hat in the last video because it's December. And I just feel like any video that I make in December should have a Santa hat in it. And there's a Santa behind me, so I'm wearing the Santa hat, and I hope that's okay. Hey everybody, how's it going? And welcome back to my channel, Reading in the Dark. My name is Byron, and I read sometimes. This video is going to be my favorite reads of 2019, so stick around if you like things that are favorites, because that's why you're here. So yeah, so this video, it's really warm in my house right now, and I'm not sure why. Oh, Phillip is here with a tennis ball. You know, Phillip hasn't actually been on the channel for a little while. He says, Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy December. He's really, really happy to be in this exact moment right now. He just wants to play with a tennis ball. That's all he wants to do. So this is Phillip, in case you're new to my channel and you haven't seen him before, which is a tragedy. Sometimes he helps me figure out what I'm going to read. You will help me again soon. He really wants me to throw this, because that's what we do. It is the greatest thing in his life, so I'm going to throw it. There he goes. So I have my hot cocoa, my Mexican hot chocolate, which, in case you haven't been here before and you haven't heard me talk about it before, I have constantly lately, especially because it's December, and it's in my favorite Christmas mug, which is this green Christmas tree mug that I got from Starbucks in 2008. But you might have noticed something different about this particular mug. I'll give you a second to think about that. Yeah, it's good. There's no chip, see? There's no chip on this mug. The secret is, actually, it's a stunt mug. So I had that mug for many, many years. I mean, I still have it, in fact, because it's right here. This is the mug I've been drinking out of. But I now have more. So these two are new. So I went on eBay, and I just looked to see if Starbucks Christmas tree mug green 2008 showed up, and sure enough, someone had two, and I bought them both. So now I don't have to drink out of the one that's chipped and cracked. So that's very exciting times in my life to have a newly reliable green Christmas tree mug. I was thinking about what video to do for this week. I was thinking at one point that I could do my least favorite books and then my favorite books, but doing least favorite book videos is actually kind of not fun, because when I started going through my books that I read this year and thinking about the ones that I enjoyed the least, it was kind of a short list, and I thought, I don't want to talk about those books, so I'm doing my favorite books instead. But yeah, so I've got 10 books on my list here, and one of them I'm actually not even done reading, but we'll get to that. So the first favorite book of mine that I read in 2019 was The House of Broken Angels by Alberto Urrea. This is a gorgeous book. I sometimes listen to a podcast of a radio show from UC Irvine called Writers on Writing, and they interview authors about books that they have that are coming out. So they had the author on, and he was talking about this book, which is semi-autobiographical. He comes from a very large Mexican-American family, and they had a big party planned for the big, patriarch of the family's birthday. I forget how old he was turning. And then like days before his big party, his wife, Mama, they called her, Mama America, actually passed away. So they had a big funeral with everybody in town because they were in town for the party. And then they had the big party. And basically it goes back and forth and tells a lot of the backstory of his father's life when he was younger, as they moved to the United States, and how they built their life over years, and just all of the, in the present day, all of the sort of infighting and like familiar family stuff, drama and whatnot that's going on between the family. And it deals with the idea of aging and being a beautiful thing. And you guys, I love a book that kind of looks back at the past of someone's life after they've been alive for a very long time. Yeah, I love that. There's something really beautiful about it. I'm excited to grow old, and I'm looking forward to having all these memories. And I like reading books about characters who look back with fondness on their lives It's very funny, too. Among lots of other things, I just really loved this book. I think this is one of the books that I stayed up really late finishing. It's a 5-star read for me. And these are actually in the order that I read them. That was the second book I read of the year. Another favorite book of mine that I read maybe a few weeks later was My Reflection in the Window. Just scared me, you guys. The Persian Boy by Mary Renault, which is actually sitting right here. I did a show several years ago with a woman. She gave us this gift, this thing that holds like incense sticks. I use it as like a weight on top of these books. So, and I don't know, it seems ancient world-y. So anyway, this is The Persian Boy by Mary Renault. And this is the second book in a trilogy that chronicles the life and the conquests of Alexander the Great. This book is told from the perspective of a young eunuch whose family is killed and who is cut and then eventually ends up serving Alexander the Great. And this book operates on the commonly held, pretty confident assumption that Alexander the Great was bisexual and enjoyed the company of men. And it is told from the perspective of this guy whose name is Bagoas. And he's a historical, true person who lived. And he is recorded in some verifiable historical texts as having been a very, very close to Alexander. He was indeed a eunuch. Whether or not they were intimately involved is hearsay, but it seems likely. And this is historical fiction, and it is written from his perspective. It is so beautifully written. I cannot possibly say enough about Mary Renault. It is gorgeous. It is heartbreaking. This young man was so devoted to Alexander, at least he is in this story. And, oh, it's just so good. I sobbed like a baby when it was done. And if you don't believe me, there's actual footage of this happening on a vlog that I posted when I finished reading this book. Oh my God, I love this book. I'm not actually I'm not an expert. I don't know a lot about world history, but I just love reading historical fiction because I like fiction that's set in a world really different from mine that takes me out of this world and into another one. So some of the larger scale things historically that are happening with Alexander and his armies in this, I don't remember anymore because I didn't know about them in much detail before I read this anyway. But the story of the characters and Alexander's mother, who is just crazy and awesome, and of course Alexander's best friend / possibly lover. It's all fascinating. It is heartbreaking and beautiful, and I cannot possibly recommend it enough if you have patience for slightly chunkier books. This book was like 500 pages, and it's just gorgeous. Now let's put this back without knocking over the hand. Hot chocolate break. This video is going to be really long. The next book on my list is Up from the Blue by Susan Henderson. Susan Henderson wrote The Flicker of Old Dreams, which is another novel that I heard about on Writers on Writing. And after reading that book and loving it and giving it 5 stars, I knew that I wanted to read her first novel, which is Up from the Blue. This tells the story of a woman who is estranged from her father, who is forced to reach out to him for help because she's about to give birth to her first child and she doesn't have anyone. And in doing so, she takes you back and she relives a lot of the memories of her childhood, a family where her mother was a severe manic depressive and was a very unstable presence in her life, and disappeared, went missing. It is heartbreaking also. I like melancholy things, I guess, apparently, in books. It's told from the perspective of this woman, but mostly in flashback from this when she's a girl. It deals with depression, it deals with mental illness, and family tension and ties and bonds, and just the sort of coming of age thing, and the trauma of growing up, unreliable parents. Her father is this just like bedraggled soul who loves his wife and his daughter and is trying to keep stuff together, but just things are constantly falling apart. It also takes kind of a sideways glance at racism through the eyes of this young girl. It's a beautiful book. I wasn't expecting to like this book as much as I liked her second novel, The Flicker of Old Dreams, but I absolutely did. I adored it. It was one of my few 5-star reads of the year, and that's by Susan Henderson, and you should check it out. The next book on my list was The One by John Marrs. This is kind of a funny one. So this is a thriller, and it's based on the premise of this company, which has pioneered a technique to test your DNA and then test the DNA of many thousands or millions of other people and determine based on your DNA who your perfect soulmate is, like who your match is. And so they're matching people up, and then in some cases the person that you're matched with lives on the other side of the world. And in many cases the person that you're matched up with is already with someone else. So what does that do to their relationship? And do they end up with you anyway? And generally it always works. People do leave their spouses or whoever their significant others are to be with this person that they're matched with, and it always just works out magically because they're meant to be together. And in some cases they're actually straight or living a straight life, but they're matched with someone of the same sex, and it's a whole thing. And I think that is actually one of the people that we follow in the book. It follows a few people who get matched and how they react to it and what happens, and then what happens with the company, because of course there's some intrigue and it's a thriller. But I wasn't expecting to love this book as much as I did. I gave it 5 stars because as a thriller, it brought so much more to the table than I was expecting in terms of like rep for queer characters and identity issues. It was just fast-paced and fun, and I really, really appreciated it. I highly recommend it if you're looking for an easy read that's entertaining but has a lot of thought going into it and is really well done. Super recommend The One by John Mars. The next book is The Red Tree by Caitlín or Kiernan. This is a book that I selected to read because I saw some other people that I follow on BookTube reading it, and it's also for my Read Harder Reading Challenge to read a book by a trans author. Caitlín or Kiernan is a trans female author. This tells the story of an alcoholic writer staying in this creepy old house while she's trying to finally write the thing that she hasn't written yet and her editor keeps bugging her about. And instead she becomes kind of obsessed with the haunted history of the house and the creepy basement, which goes on forever, and starts just writing a journal instead of what she was supposed to be writing. There was a manuscript left behind by the man who was renting the house before her, who then disappeared, and he didn't finish it, but she finds one page of it in a typewriter, and then she finds the rest of it in a crawl space way off the basement. She starts reading that. So parts of the book are actually excerpts from his manuscript, and parts of his manuscript are excerpts from other things. It's like nesting dolls of sources in this book, and you start to lose track of exactly what document you're in while you're reading the book, and it all kind of blends together. And that's brilliant, because you end up as disoriented and increasingly fascinated and intrigued, but as confused as the primary narrator of the book. The woman starts to kind of lose her mind a little bit, and you lose your mind with her, and it's written brilliantly. I love reading books where the narrator of the book isn't totally confident in what's going on anymore, and their awareness is sort of hampered by either substance abuse or drinking, or just like the erosion of their mental wellness, and reading it from their perspective and being taken into that same mental space with them. And that's done really well in this book. I really highly recommend it. I really want to read more books by this author, and I hope to in the future. The next book on my list is Sing Unburied, Sing by Jesmyn Ward, which everyone has heard of and is right here. Sing Unburied, Sing was the nominee for the National Book Award. The author, Jesmyn Ward, has won the National Book Award in the past. This is written from the perspective of Jojo, a young man who's 13 whose father has been in prison most of his life. And he and his mother, she abuses a lot of substances, let's put it that way. They get into the car and go on a road trip to go pick up his father from prison, and they have escapades. And his grandmother is not well, and she's nearing the end of her life. And everybody in this family has some sort of special power. He can understand the thoughts and the feelings of animals, or actually any living thing, including like plants and trees and stuff. And his grandmother has a power, and I don't remember what all of their abilities are. But it's not fantasy or sci-fi. It's sort of a magical realism situation. It's gritty and it's depressing, but it's so beautifully written that I loved it anyway, because again, melancholy books. And it deals with old age, and it deals once again with flashbacks to old hurts that have continued to traumatize and hurt someone later into their life, and they start to deal with it. And it's generational, and it's just beautiful. I'm not going to say too much more about it because everybody has talked about this book, but I really loved it. It did not disappoint, and I highly recommend it. The next book on my list is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alix E. Harrow. This is a fantasy novel, and It is written by the author who wrote a short story that I adored on Tor.com called The Autobiography of a Traitor and a Half Savage. Recommend you look that up on the web. You can read it for free. I was entranced by that story and wanted to read this novel as soon as it came out as a result. This is the story of a young woman who is of sort of like ambiguous ethnicity during a time when racism was pretty much accepted. It's set in the early 1900s. And she's been brought up as the ward of a very wealthy man who is a collector of curiosities from around the globe, like Egyptian artifacts and things like that. Her father works for this man, whose name is Mr. Locke. So her father works for Mr. Locke, and he's one of the people who goes around the world and finds these treasures for Mr. Locke. As a result, he almost never sees his daughter, whose name is January, by the way. You sort of get the sense that in some ways she is part of his collection. She is this exotic curiosity. People always ask, what are you? So the book deals quite a bit with race and prejudice, and the fantasy, the aspect of it is really, really cool. So she finds a manuscript in this little ancient chest that is in Mr. Locke's collection, which is where he has put things for her in the past, toys and stuff for her to play with. Because back in the day, kids weren't really allowed to be kids. They were expected to just behave as little adults as soon as possible. So he sort of hid, fun things for her in this chest sometimes. And this book shows up, and it's a journal, and she starts to read it. And the way that that journal impacts her is really, really interesting and takes the book in a really cool direction. She has a power. It becomes even more fanciful as the book goes on. It's a portal fantasy, and she's being pursued, and there's a whole thing. It just whisks you off to other lands, and there's like these secretive hidden doors, and there's keys to open the doors, and then you go into another world, and it has to do with her relationship with her parents, and reading, and it's just really, really enjoyable. I really liked it. I thought it might end up being a 5-star read for me, and it just was sort of like not quite, something didn't take it right over the edge for it to be 5 stars, but I really enjoyed it. And if everything I just described to you sounds enjoyable to you, you should give it a shot and read it as well. I recommend it. The next book in my list is Watershell Refused by Lucie McKnight Hardy. I talked about this very recently because I read it in October. So this tells the story of Nif, which I believe is short for Jennifer, and her family who, after the accidental drowning of her sister, moves to the Welsh, countryside, basically. A small village on the Welsh borders to escape their grief. And while they're there, so basically Nif has developed this sort of system of magic or like mysticism or witchcraft basically in her head, and she's using that as a way to sort of cope with the world around her. And she meets a young boy in this town while they're there who is interested in learning more about it with her, and they both have similar interests, and they both embark on this like journey of like killing animals and using them in rituals, I guess, question mark. It's interesting. We'll just say that. It's a coming of age story. It's dark and psychological and really well written, and it's briskly paced. I thought it was fascinating. I really enjoyed the setting. I really enjoyed the characters. I loved the flashbacks to all of the questions surrounding the death of her sister, and it has a fantastic ending. It was a great ending. This book really surpassed my expectations as well. I adored it, and I highly recommend it. I give it 5 stars. The next book on my list, Dracul by Dacre, Stoker, and J.D. Barker. Once again, I still don't have the physical copy because my friend still has it. I think she finished it, but she hasn't given it back to me yet, which is fine. So anyway, I read Dracul while I was on vacation in California visiting my family. So it took me like 2 weeks to read it, and it would not normally have taken me that long because I absolutely loved it. But because I was on vacation, I was reading like 1 or 2 chapters a night while I was at my parents' house visiting. And this is basically a prequel to Dracula, written by the great-grand-nephew of Bram Stoker. And it is presented as the journals of Bram Stoker, and presents this idea that Bram Stoker is more intimately and directly connected to the events that he chronicles in Dracula than maybe we originally thought. And it brings new light to, the backstory of Dracula, himself, and the lore of the vampires, and also brings new meaning to the foreword of Dracula, which very clearly states that all of the letters in Dracula are real and really happened, and he just put them in order. is really, really clever. I didn't know how I would feel about Bram Stoker being a character in this story, but it actually totally works, and I adored it. Of course, because I love Dracula, it was a favorite read of mine, but honestly, it's really, really good. And it was a really, I don't know, it was a fast-paced read. I think it was not too crazy long, and I just really enjoyed it. I'm really glad that I really enjoyed it because I had a lot of high hopes for it, and usually that doesn't work out well. But now I know that I can reread this whenever I want and enjoy it. Very gothic, dark, Draculian. This book absolutely feels like it was written by Bram Stoker, at least in like the voice, the writing style. They nail the epistolary format of the original novel. It's just a really good companion to Dracula, and so achievement unlocked, Mr. Stoker, because your book is awesome. Highly recommend it if you like horror books and if you like Dracula. Read it if you haven't already. The last book on my list is this guy. An Orchestra of Minorities by Chigozie Obioma. This is a Nigerian author. Man Booker Prize winner? Oh, finalist, sorry. Yeah, he's the author of The Fisherman, which I have not read, but I will. But basically, this tells the story of a man in Nigeria who's just a simple poultry farmer. He sees a woman about to throw herself over a bridge, and in order to stop her, he throws a couple of his prized chickens over the edge of the bridge so that she can watch them fall, see how far the fall is, stuns her back into reality and causes her to no longer want to kill herself. So he saves her life, and then they fall in love, but he's not good enough for her family. They're a very, very hoity-toity, wealthy Nigerian family that does not think that he is good enough for their daughter because he's not educated. He didn't go to college. So he follows the advice of a friend of his and goes to attend college. There are trials and tribulations, shall we say. It turns out to be a scam, and he has to pick up the pieces and move on from there, and it's all in service of the love of this woman. Now, I have not finished this yet. I am this far through. So I'm about 315 pages in, and it's only about 400 pages long, so I'm hoping to finish it tonight. We'll see it tonight. This morning. It's been put on hold, which really, really sucks. I would have been done days ago, but like it's December and there was a party. So I went to that, and then so that day was shot and the next day was shot too because reasons. And then my two friends that had been renting a room for me in my house moved into their house. So I've been helping them move, and that was like a several day process. And I went over there last night to help them install a chandelier. Christmas cards, like I've been sending out Christmas cards. I just got them in the mail today, so hopefully they'll make it to everybody on time. So I've just been like distracted with life. If it weren't for those things, this book would be long gone because I love it. It is compulsively readable. Is that like blurby enough? So this is written in the Igbo literary tradition, and I'm sure I pronounced that wrong, IGBO. And the book is told from the perspective of this protagonist's chi, and he is advocating on his behalf to God, basically, to be lenient and give him a reprieve for the act that his chi is afraid he may have committed or might be about to commit. That's so interesting the way it's written, and you really do learn a lot about that literary tradition and that spiritual belief system. It's a beautiful character. I love his romance with the woman that he's in love with. But this book is wonderful, and I want to be reading this right now instead of talking to you. So, but I love you all, so I'm talking to you instead. And again, I'm on page 315. So even though I haven't finished it yet, I'm confident in saying this is one of my favorite books of the year. So those are my top 10 favorite reads from 2019. I loved all of those books and would highly recommend that you pick up any and or all of them if you're looking for something to read and if you have similar reading tastes to me. It is interesting to me that my tastes have started to swerve so fully towards literary fiction since I used to really only read science fiction and or thrillers. Oh, also, I'm wearing my Santa hat in this video. Even though this is not a Christmas-related video, it is an end-of-the-year-related video, and I felt sort of sad that I wasn't wearing my Santa hat. My Santa hat in the last video because it's December. And I just feel like any video that I make in December should have a Santa hat in it. And there's a Santa behind me, so I'm wearing the Santa hat, and I hope that's okay. But yeah, those books are all amazing. I recommend all of them. If you have any comments on those books, leave that comment in the box below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button or the thumbs up button, and I would really appreciate that. That helps me out a lot. If you love this video and you'd like to see more content like this in the future, you can subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon so you get notified when I post new content, which lately has been every Wednesday, and that would help me out even more and be very much appreciated. So, until next time, I will be here in the dark with my hot cocoa reading.